I'm accompanied here by our J9 CIMIC expert, Lieutenant Colonel Christian Koch. Is going to have the floor for a brief presentation as well. Please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the CCOE to having us on board in that journey. I'm working in the Civil Military Cooperation branch for plans and operation purposes, and I'm trying just to support Sofia to have a little bit civil flavor in her hybrid heavy environment and try to answer based on your questions some things which are CIMIC specific. I would like to pay some special thanks to Chris, because if I take your last slide, then we could just deduct strategic, operational, and tactical level actions, and we would have the perfect solution. But we need somebody to implement, and then maybe that's the challenge we have to talk about. With that, I hand it back to Sofia, and have fun.
Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so with this presentation, I will give you an overview of how we see hybrid threats here within SHAPE, how we perceive that the military instrument of power can address these threats, and finally, and as you can see throughout the whole presentation, it will be sort of underlined, I will wrap up with the so what, so providing you our perspective on how civil-military cooperation can actually be a way to counter hybrid activities. So next slide, please. Thank you. So to give you a general overview of who we are, so we are Allied Command Operations, ICO, with its headquarters at SHAPE, and we are one of the two NATO strategic commands, Supreme Strategic Commands, and we are supported by 3 subordinate commands. Our role here at SHAPE is to prepare, plan, and conduct military operations to meet the strategic objectives, the political objectives. So inside SHAPE, I personally work at the Deterrence Group from the Comprehensive Crisis and Operations Management Center. And in countering hybrid threats, we deal cross-cutting to the whole organization. So we work together with J9, J2 intelligence. For the academia out there, we deal a lot with numbers here at the military level, which is a bit confusing at the first impression. But so J9 CIMIC, J2 intelligence, legal affairs, communications, we work together to give the feedback and the direction and guidance to our subordinate commands as well, and to try and prepare for countering hybrid threats. So next slide, please. So focusing on the environment we are currently facing and operating as well, you may see this image on the left-hand side that so hybrid activities operate throughout the peace, crisis, and conflict spectrum. They focus on the synchronization of different instruments of power across the spectrum that here at SHAPE we call it the diameter spectrum, and in a number of other organizations as well. So you can read the diameter there. And so this spans across the full societal functions to achieve certain effects. And these effects can be or not military effects. So hybrid threats are intended to create ambiguity, to blurring the lines between the threshold of detection and attribution, as you can see in the image as well, which will delay, or it's intended and designed to delay our reaction and to difficult our attribution as well. So the hybrid threats, they can increase in intensity. So their effects can actually be, sometimes it's only felt months or even years after it's employed, and they can also increase throughout the horizontal escalation. So throughout the synchronization of multiple instruments of power. They can be employed or perpetrated by both state and non-state actors, and its execution can be supported by civil military enablers, paramilitary teams, private military companies, you can name a number of them. And so the civil environment is the everything that is the non-military environment, it's a
non-military part of the operating environment.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. So everything that is not military is the civilian environment. And with this, next slide, please. Okay. So NATO has a counter-hybrid toolbox already in place. With this, it's also where we engage the most with other organizations at usually informal staff-to-staff level. And I would like to draw your attention to the middle column. So as was already expressed by Chris, and thank you very much for that, we have whole of government approach, the need for enhancing allied resilience, civil military instruments brought together, and here I would like to highlight, as also based on the source that you can access from the presentation, the comprehensive military, the comprehensive preventive and response options that integrate military and non-military instruments of power to address hybrid threats, and the extended cooperation. So this also relates with the whole of government approach, and all of these elements of the toolbox, they need to be interconnected. They need to work together so we can actually effectively address these threats. Also, as Chris was saying, again, thank you very much. So to enhance resilience and deter hybrid threats, resilience as part of deterrence, and mostly deterrence by denial, which is one of the most important components of deterrence. And of course, we need to start examining emerging disruptive technologies, not only from the other side to see how this threat can be perpetrated from there, but also how can we use them in our favor, for instance, through big data, and to identify deep fakes or troll farms and all those disinformation and other things that are out there. And also, just on another note, so the deployment of counter-hybrid support teams, the last one, the second biggest deployment, occurred last month to Lithuania, based on the tensions in the border with Belarus. And with this, I would like also to handle the speak to Chris just for some words, because he's a Finnish expert.
Yeah, I just would like to add on some facts, because the theory behind the tools you can see there is quite clear, but how to make it tangible, what does it actually mean, and how the military can implement that. With the tools we are assuming behind it, we are deep in the nation's sovereignty, actually. And this is one of the biggest challenges in an alliance, where the things are happening in country or countries are not attributable and are definitely under or sub-threshold to Article 5. From a civil perspective, what can we do? One of our core functions is civil-military liaison. Through that function and through that activity, we can achieve many effects in the portion of preparedness. And that's also mentioned by Chris. We shouldn't fight the threat when it already happened. Preparedness is the key here. And how could we do that? Of course, we are used to the whole of government approach on a national level, but going a little bit beyond to have resilient society is a question mark. I question that also here, how that could be possible. But let's go back 50 years, how the Cold War did influence nations to prepare themselves. And I throw that also in the room. Was that preparedness on a whole of society level or not? But I think we can draw many lessons out of the old days, even if the threat environment was different. I will give some examples of the toolbox, how it could actually have happen. That is the liaison and relation to the private sector mentioned already, IOGO NGOs on the ground, also paramilitary organizations. I also questioned it because this goes a little bit into the legal area about competent, non-competent. But what is absolutely effectively and should be done more intensively is the collaborative planning and execution of exercises. We can demonstrate high-level disaster response activities on a civil basis, even on the level of, let's say, supranational, multinational level. These are just some tangible examples how we can provide these tools in the phase inside peacetime, because that is what's count before a transition and being reactive after an incident. Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. So currently at SHAPE, we have three major work strands. So we developed some doctrinal documents. One of them is in support of that, the development of comprehensive preventive and response options with a civil-military final objective. The military advisory teams that, as you can also, so in the source that was in the previous slide, it is also mentioned as a way to offer comprehensive civil-military advice to counter-hybrid support teams. I would just like to note that this is a concept still in development, and we have an ACO-wide hybrid warfare working group to improve our common picture, common operating picture, and the way we address hybrid threats together. And also, just for your knowledge, we share a counter-hybrid weekly report, so we are always doing a timely assessment, or we wish to do so. So next slide, please. Thank you. So for the development of our work strands, we always have to keep in mind that, as established in the Article 3 of the NATO's funding treaty, Washington Treaty, North Atlantic Treaty, as you wish to call it, the individual allies have the primary responsibility to maintain and strengthen its resilience to respond and recovery from any attack or any other major shock, a natural disaster or a crisis, and this will combine civil preparedness with military capabilities. And that is why that when challenged by the hybrid, the CMIC, I apologize, the CMIC COE to identify the center of gravity of in a hybrid environment, we firstly identified, or we consider that to be the national resilience as the first line of defense. And when this is threatened, when this center of gravity is attacked, and national populations might eventually feel threatened and losing trust in their own national governments, this can have an impact also in the NATO center of gravity, so the alliance cohesion. And if threatened, this can hamper the timely decision making and even the consensus at times, which is also necessary to have the public opinion and the support for the populations in the civilian and military side in every country. So there is a reliance on the elements of national civil preparedness and their resilience to enhance NATO's overall counter-hybrid effort. And this is why that we need to maintain trust amongst allies and to ensure unity of efforts by building a sharing understanding of the environment and efficiency through a whole of government, whole of society, but ultimately a comprehensive approach. So next slide, please. Thank you. And on the definitions, and as we discussed earlier, we recognize there are some limitations or some limiting factor in having definitions. However, so we can see that as a sort of elephant in the room, but for the sake of having this common understanding, a shared terminology is necessary. So we see these, or at least within SHAPE, we have some working definitions that are proposed definitions, SHAPE agreed, but still not NATO-wide agreed. And so we see a hybrid threat as being a hybrid threat when it is part of a overall of a wider hybrid strategy. So there is a conceptual cloudiness. Hybrid is everything, hybrid is nothing. And this was a cyber attack. Was it an isolated event? Was it employed as part of a hybrid strategy? Or was it just the person that, again, Renee, that was not happy about his salary and they decided to have a cyber attack? And thank you for that example, Chris. But, well, so this all ties to the intent of our adversary. So if they aim to, if their political objective is to employ different instruments of power with the ultimate aim to disrupt NATO in this case, so we are facing a hybrid strategy and not isolated events. And that is why that having a civil-military cooperation emerges as an essential function for this understanding also throughout the peace, crisis, and conflict spectrum where hybrid threats operate. Would you like to add something on the CMIC?
Not at this point. Yeah.
Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. So calling your attention to the image that you can see there, hybrid occur below the threshold of crisis and conflict, and I call it the subthreshold, with Article 5 of the Washington Treaty in the middle, which can trigger allied collective defense. And this can lead to a state of conflict. So the transition period between the subthreshold and the conflict, it's where, or state of competition, if you will, to call it that way, it's the biggest challenge for resilience. So if the society is not prepared enough, or it's not resilient enough at cognitive, infrastructure, civil level, then the response to the crisis can be slower, and that can be critical for the overall success. So that is why it's also essential to have the comprehensive approach beforehand, so we can underpin this resilience, and also picking up the brain of Chris' presentation to solve the authorizations questions and the capability gaps that sometimes exist in different parts of the government. On the left-hand side, just to call the attention for NATO 2030 report from the Secretary General, where he calls the attention to build greater awareness for hybrid threats, to have a shared terminology, situational awareness, and keep monitoring these threats. So this is also probably going to be the base for the next NATO strategic concept. So it's also something that we need to pay close attention to. So next slide, please. So again, the military instrument of power has an overall supportive role in countering hybrid threats. However, and given the peace, crisis, and conflict spectrum of the operating environment, in case of a major crisis, the military instrument of power can sort of transition its role and become supported by nations. But what we have to keep in mind is that it is a supportive role. So on the right-hand side now, and also drawing on the NATO's 2015 report on countering hybrid threats, we see that it is necessary to prepare, deter, and defend to hybrid threats. So in any of those cycles, you can see that the middle one regarding defense, that is the only one that is related to conflict, because since NATO is a defensive alliance, we can only defend in case we are attacked and we are past Article 5. All the others relate to peacetime and crisis eventually. And the one that I consider that is very important is the understand layer that evolves throughout the peace, crisis, and conflict. So we need to understand ourselves, and we need to understand our adversary and their threat perception of us. And that is where CIMIC emerges again as an essential factor to help us understand and promote awareness of both ourselves, the adversary, and the environment itself. So next slide, please. Thank you. So on NATO, on the military instrument of power, vulnerabilities and opportunities, you can see that there are some, reading both layers, and even though vulnerabilities are slower, we still have to work on on addressing them and enhance our opportunities. So some of our opportunities, and where NATO is strong, such as our democracy values and the fact that we are 30 nations working for the same goal, it can be exploited by our adversaries. So they can try to undermine through different narratives and Stratcom and all those hybrid activities that they can employ against us. They can underpin our decision-making processes, they can make us slower, they can make us confused, whereas is this actually a hybrid activity? Should we activate Article 5? Should we attribute this? So that can be something that can be exploited by our adversaries, and we need to keep working together with the civil side as well to address it. And even though I'm a civilian, I still work from the military side of the house, so I can also stress that importance. And also, so just to finalize, next slide, please. Thank you. So we do see the civil-military cooperation as being a way or one of the most essential ways to counter hybrid activities. However, and we believe that this can only be successfully achieved through unity of effort, transparency, resilient societies and civil preparedness, and a continuous liaison between military and civilians. However, as everything that it looks very good, we also have challenges. So, and this is mostly a personal perspective on this, we need to balance the impact of the military support in the society to evaluate how deep the nation wants to go with the cooperation, and to avoid reaching a point of the so-called security dilemma where heightened security can lead to escalation. So we need to focus on the main efforts to explain and to have the military facilitating civilian expertise, because the military has unique capabilities that can be exploited and should be exploited by the civilian side, and working together we can indeed address hybrid threats in a successful manner. And to finalize, I would pass the floor also to Chris, since he's the CIMIC expert. And thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward for the Q&As. Chris, please.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Yeah, just 2-3 points from my side. Of course, this was all done from a very strategic perspective. So some things may sound very tactical as a tool, but of course there are strategic considerations which are connected to a lot of challenges at the moment. I will just give you some challenges we just have to overcome at the very moment. Of course, we are talking to 30 different nations in that case, and there are national differences. There are different threat perceptions, of course. The regional location is an impacting factor. There are some bilateral agreements we cannot disconnect. And of course, there are the sovereignty of each nation, the national caveats, and of course, interests. Even in an alliance, they are not always aligned. And I think that is pretty clear. If we're taking the facts of the society, then I ask myself, and I ask, of course, you all, how to convince a society in deepest peacetime, which they might perceive the situation, to be prepared for something which is for them at the very normal day not tangible. And it might, in the military perspective, go up to a Third World War scenario. So that's very difficult to get these message to nations with a total different culture and understanding. So these are things which make our daily life not easier. And of course, how can military contribute to the effects on a society, which obviously in a hybrid scenario is maybe the main target of those? The answer, and we have heard it a couple of times, is the preparedness. I won't use the word always resilience, because this is such a broad word and can be used for so many different things. But resilience is maybe the preparedness of a nation, and maybe the preparedness of structures over the boundary of a nation is the answer we have to provide. And the military, what's our role in this? Of course, we try to prepare the military requirements to make a nation prepared, and to help them to develop the structure. I would like to point out one additional point on the NATO 2030 considerations, and the majority of you might know it. Not only the hybrid counter-hybrid activities are strengthened, also the commitment to reinforce and strengthen resilience after the initial commitment at 2016, now up to 2030 is strengthened. They are asked to provide more transparency. The assessments on nations should be done more frequent on the political level, an intensified civil-military engagement, and of course down the road for the strategic and operational tactical headquarters of NATO, the structures into the nations of their location and area of responsibility need to be intensified. That shortly from my side, and I would just advise that my CIMIC liaison colleagues are also behind us and around us on the screens in the aftermath for your question. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sofia.